Good afternoon, everyone. How are we all doing today? All right. So I hope you've all had a good chance to look at the bracket. So looking at the Dosic, we haven't quite gotten to that rule set yet. So the big thing for this week is we use for this week we're using King's Cup rules, which are used in most of the tourney formats right now, and we people have to submit their list before they know the maps or their opponent in the tourney. And once they do that, I randomize the matchups. So they basically have to make an all-comers list. They have to design their list without knowing who they're going to be fighting or what they're going to be fighting on. We'll be implementing that more complicated system in the near future. So, we've got the High Elves returning. And I'm going to tell you guys, there are a lot of Dwarves this week. Yes, this is the first game. And I'm going to do my best to not talk super loud today, because my voice got fucking shredded yesterday. So I'm going to do my best to kind of keep it low and more ASMR in quality and not just shout. Ahmad, that music was, if you look up, literally just Google royalty-free fantasy battle music, and you'll see a channel that's like, it's called like 4Tune. Just all their tunes are super great and they're royalty-free, and I really appreciate that they provide that for YouTubers so that I can run ads on this. But yeah, there's an assload of dwarves this week. So in this first matchup, we have a very, very cool, unique army that we haven't seen in this tournament before. A Alarial army over from Avalorn. We've got 2 units of Aurelian Reaver archers. We've got the Pure Main Company. We've got Loremaster of Hoeth, a noble, and Alarial the Radiant on foot, which is pretty unusual. And looks like she's bringing to the table Banishment, Regrowth, and Shield of Thorns, along with her items and abilities. We've also got 2 Treemen walking in here to start punting people. We've got the Scions of Mathlon providing their local ward save buff. We've also got a Frostheart Phoenix. And I think that's it for the High Elves. So very, very elite localized High Elf force. Oh, and the Lordmaster's got Spirit Leech. Meanwhile, the superior in numbers dwarves are bringing to the table, looks like we've got about 3 units of miners with blasting charges. The army's being led by a Rune Lord, and this is the dwarves of Karak Kadrin. We've got a Rune Lord here with just Wrath and Ruin. Then we've got a Thane with the Master Rune of Slowness and the Ironbeard's Ring, which gives fire weakness to local targets. And then, speaking of fire, he has all sorts of fire damage. He's also got the Dragonback Slayers, which will also increase fire damage taken by local enemies. We've got 2 units of Dwarf Warriors, 2 units of Iron Drakes, 2 units of Iron Drakes with Trollhammer Torpedoes, a unit of Thunderers, and then in the back line we've got 2 units of Longbeards with great weapons and 1 more Miners with blasting charges. Yep. And then he has another Thane with the Rune of Slowness and the Ironbeard's Ring. So this is just a massive fire army. Like, flames for days. So we've got a super elite, very synergistic force of High Elves going up against just flamethrowers personified. Like, this is the closest thing to Chaos Dwarves we have right now. Which, for anyone that doesn't know, Chaos Dwarves in the Dawi's own tongue are called Dawizar, which literally means fire dwarves. We'll have to see if that Frost Phoenix is capable of putting them out. Those tree men are going to have to be very careful, though. Those Iron Drake torpedoes are going to, or Trollhammer torpedoes are going to make a mess of these tree men ancients. So already on the onset here, we see the Aurelian Reavers are probably looking around for an interesting place to get involved. A couple of blasting charges go off and do a little bit of damage, not too much. The trees eat a decent amount of fire. The Dwarves only have one traditional shooting unit to deal with the Frost Phoenix, so the Frost Phoenix is going to have pretty free reign to just mess people up. And we see here that the High Elf army has entered into the forest. The first volley of fire goes down on the Frostheart Phoenix and does absolutely nothing. I think that Phoenix took like less than 50 damage from that entire volley. Like, that was just pitiful. Because it's got fairly high armor. And then it has a ward save right now because Alariel hasn't used any magic. So here we can see that the Thunderers do trade pretty well with these Aurelian Reaver archers. Can y'all hear me okay, by the way? I'm trying to talk pretty quiet compared to how I normally do to let my voice rest, but just let me know if y'all can hear me alright. Here we see some more blasting charges go into these condensed High Elves, which does do some fair damage to the Scions of Mathlan, but the trees do absorb a decent amount of fire. Here we see the first Earthblood go down, and the High Elves are going to want to they need to focus their efforts on these Iron Drake Trollhammer torpedoes. If they can take out the torpedoes nice and early, like get the Frost Phoenix on this one, get the Aurelian Reavers to charge in on the Thunderers to tear them up in combat, and then they really could just go ham with the Treemen for the rest of the battle. Getting rid of the Iron Drakes is going to be the most crucial part of this fight. Here we do see the first Thane has got involved, and a big fat volley comes in from those torpedoes, which is going to do some pretty substantial damage. And now that this guy's in here, all of these units are now at 22% fire weakness, except for, of course, the Treemen, who already have a fire weakness of... they already have a fire weakness of 22, so it should be higher. But they do have some pretty good... oh, that's because I wandered off into a different unit. Treemen. Yeah, they're at almost 50%. These Trollhammer torpedoes, if they get a good volley onto these Treemen, they're going to massacre them. But there is a ton of ward saves and physical resistance and all sorts of niceness going on. Here we do see the Iron Drakes are firing into the Treemen, but they're not going to do any damage because the Treemen have 100 armor. I mean, the fire throwers are very not good for armor piercing, so they're just going to bounce for the most part. But you see those Trollhammer torpedoes do come in and do a little bit of damage. But fighting in this forest is good for the High Elves. It provides them with a little bit of cover. I'd probably pull the Treemen back to like this little space right here if I could. That way most of the fire is just totally missing. But things are going okay. The Scions of Mathlan are still providing a global ward save to all these units. Not global, but local ward save to all these units, which is proving very, very effective. Here we see the Rune Lord has run into personal combat, which could be a little bit dangerous because he is going to be pretty vulnerable to getting just stomped on. But if these Scions of Mathlan break and run away, that could actually be pretty bad for the High Elves because that would eliminate their local ward save they're getting from that unit. This is a unit you want to keep saving alive, but all that fire damage is just tearing them apart and causes their leadership to just drop, and they are out of here. And with them gone, that big ward save coming in on everyone is going to go away pretty quick. That being said, these Treemen are running at a very, very high physical resistance. We do see their leadership's actually being pretty negatively affected by the Iron Drake torpedoes, and I'm not sure where the Frost Phoenix is. There he is. He needs to get down on these torpedoes over here and just like rip him a new one, or on these Iron Drakes, but he needs to just try and get the Dwarves to divide their attention. They do need to probably get the Swordmaster. I probably want to get the Loremaster of Hoeth and the Noble over on this Thane and try and chop him into bits and get him out of here, because this Thane is a pretty big problem because he's providing that local increase to fire damage. Here we see this Treeman has actually, I think he might have just wandered out of range of the Shieldstone of Aisha, which is right here. No, looks like he's still in. As long as he's in that, he actually will mitigate a fair amount of that fire damage due to the 12% physical resist plus his own natural physical resistance for being a forest spirit. But these Aurelian Reavers need to be charging these guys. Like, there's no reason for them to be sitting back here just putzing away with their arrows. They're not going to do any damage that's going to be meaningful. They need to charge and get involved. And Alarielle does have Banishment as a spell. She needs to drop a fat Banishment like right here or right here, just anywhere really, because that Banishment would do a ton of damage to these dwarves. Here we do see the first of the treemen has broken. If Alarielle has her, I don't know if she has it. Does she have her super heal item? Shield Stone. Yeah, she does. The Star of Avalorn. She needs to, when that tree man comes back, she needs to pop it on this local area. I don't think she's even used it yet. Here we do see the Iron Drakes do get picked on a little bit by the Frost Phoenix, but he gets out of there. These Aurelian Reavers gotta get involved, man. They're such a cheap unit. It doesn't really matter if they die because they're not providing any value right now, just kind of running around. They need to get involved in this fight immediately. I mean, hell, I'd even be pushing the tree man through just to come stomp on these Iron Drake torpedoes and just have the High Elves follow them around as they just sort of waltz around and stomp on people. We do see the Frost Phoenix comes down here again, trying to do some more damage to these Trollhammer torpedoes, but it's going to take time. We got rifles firing into it, and I don't believe it has... it does have its ward save active due to having some Winds of Magic saved up. Here we see this tree man is getting rather close to breaking. The Alarielle needs to pop her... she needs to pop her Healing Star, like right now. Their army has taken a fair amount of damage. This is a very grindy engagement, I will say that much. But like, she seriously needs to pop that. There's no point in wasting magic on Earthblood when you have a much better version. All right, we do see the Star of Avalorn go down, but it might be too little, too late. This tree man is so close to breaking. -1, 2, like he's just hovering. Reduce the game volume by about 25%. Okay, I'll do that when this battle looks like it's pretty much wrapped up. Alright, so this treeman does break thanks to the continuous firepower coming in from the Iron Drakes. Oof, this is just a very grindy affair, but that is just so much fire. Oof. It's looking like Kadrin's gonna pull this out. Like there is some pretty serious firepower among the elves, but unfortunately treemen do rely pretty heavily on magic damage, which the dwarves mitigate a fair amount of. Looks like the Phoenix has been pretty much seen off. These Iron Drakes, even though they're not actually doing a ton of damage necessarily to like the tree man and such, they actually are doing a pretty good job of just reducing the leadership by applying the burnt status, which you can see the instant they connect, leadership just instantly drops by like 16, which that's just a ton of leadership to suddenly lose. The only way I could see the High Elves turning this around is if they can just survive long enough that all of these guys run out of ammo, but the odds of that do not seem very great. At this point, what the High Elves probably need to do is, yeah, deal with this isolated group of miners, like pick off all these isolated dwarf groups, especially the miners, bring the Frostheart Phoenix in to finish off these Iron Drakes, though I don't think he's going to make it. Oh, are they going to get off that last volley? Oh, he breaks at the last second, which is not a good place to break because they're going to... Are they going to get off a volley? Nope. They thought about it for a while. But, like, he needs to just try and rally his entire army back into here and start getting off some more heals to just try and sustain himself through this fight. You hear Chloe in the background. No, the Frost Phoenix still there. If he could get the Frost Phoenix over here and actually drop a couple of heals on it, he might be able to salvage the situation. These Cav, I mean, the Thunderers are pretty much out of ammo. Looks like they've got maybe 1 or 2 volleys left. If these Cav can survive this Thunderer fire and then start just mass charging all these Iron Drakes and stuff, maybe they can turn it around. The balance of power has shifted back towards the center. We do see the treemen are all retreating, but this one's actually in okay health. This Thane is nearly dead. If they can drop this Thane and take out the Rune Lord, there might be a chance of turning things around. This Frostheart Phoenix needs to get over here, though, and Alarielle needs to pop another Star of Avalorn. Like, there's no reason to have the Phoenix engage anything right now. It's very low on health and needs to get over here. In the meantime, though, it looks like one of the treemen... No, he's still alive. He's barely got any health, but he is still alive. Oh, see, that seems like such a waste of the Frost Phoenix. He could easily float his butt over here and just drop a heal and get it into really good position. Alariel has gotten super low on health, though luckily for the high... I mean, they do still have the Lore Master of Hoeth in very good health. And the Lore Master of Hoeth is actually good enough at fighting with his... high armor piercing and anti-infantry bonus, he can actually do a pretty good amount of damage to all these guys. And if anything, I would actually probably start pulling Alariel back a little bit because she is giving everyone in this area magic damage, which kind of sucks because it's making the dwarves harder to kill. I'd actually probably pull her away so that her bonus isn't applying anymore. Here we do see that this treeman has shattered. Unfortunately, it looks like the dwarves haven't quite realized that yet, and they're still doing quite a bit of damage to it. Oh, we do see a very, very nice Star of Avalon come down here. I think it might have been too little too late, though. He does break. Hopefully he walks through it, but it looks like he's going to walk out of it, which is going to make him very unlikely to rally, especially when he keeps taking pot shots in the back. So both the treemen are gone now, and pretty much all that's left is the command squad. But Alariel is super low on health, and she's already hit her healing cap. And the problem with Alariel at this point is that, like, she's been focusing so much on healing despite having a banishment available, and I feel like a banishment could have single-handedly won this game. Like, a really well-placed banishment... Oh, we're getting a tiny bit of lag, but like a really well-placed banishment could have easily been dropped right on top of all these dwarves as they were all bunched up and would have killed like 50 or 60 of them at least, if not more than that. So, looks like the balance of power is actually slightly in the Elves' favor, but I think that might change against them when Alariel goes down. She is at 1 hit point, which means she's probably dead. I don't know where all this lag is coming from all of a sudden. We do have all these brave ranged units charging in, but it looks like the dwarves are pretty much consolidating all of their forces. Apologize for the lag, guys. Not sure what's causing it. Oof. Alariel dies and the world starts lagging. Yep. Come on, baby. You can do it. I think if the High Elf heroes are able to fight to the death, I think there's actually a reasonable chance they could win this engagement, but I don't know if they're going to suffer from army losses before then, because there's still a ton of dwarves on the field. I mean, there's almost 230 dwarves, and these guys are probably about to shatter, if not break, or be completely wiped out, so it's pretty likely that it seems unlikely to me that the High Elves won't suffer army losses, but I guess we'll see what happens. Excuse me. I'm going to go ahead and change my settings while we're waiting for the lag to stop. Hopefully that's a little better, guys. Yeah, I see the balance of power. I mean, it's kind of wavering all over the place. Like, it really comes down to if these guys can get away with not suffering army losses. I mean, they're completely surrounded. They are taking considerable damage, and their leadership is just fluctuating wildly. I feel pretty confident that the Lord Master of Hoeth can handle this pack along with the Noble, but we'll have to see. The horses have rallied, which at this point, the only thing that's going to be effectively doing is just trying to avoid army losses. Okay, these Iron Drakes need to be super careful, because if they shoot into this, they could potentially hit allies, and that will apply burnt to allies, which is going to cause the dwarves to break as well. So if I were him, I would not shoot the Iron Drakes into this. I would wait until these guys are like isolated and then do it. But both these guys are at the healing cap, and the balance of power is starting to swing significantly. Oh, you know what? Yep, that's going to be it. That's going to be it right there. The Lore Master of Hoeth is broken, and yeah, there's no way the Noble's going to be able to do this. All right, so it was a long, long fight with a lot of tankiness and a lot of absurdity. But at the end of the day, Karak Kadrin managed to burn down the forest. Really interesting game, though. Two very, very interesting armies. Alright, so I'll go ahead and update the scoreboard. So Hazard will be heading to the next round. And we'll play DeKervin for an excellent game. And we've got Dossick and Outer Region next. Let me change the map real quick. We're going to Liangwell. All right. Oh yeah, sorry guys. I'll try and be better about zoom ups. Zoom ups, zoom ins. Bork. Bork, bork. There we go. All right, here we go. Dwarves versus Empire. What's my opinion on gnomes coming back to Warhammer in 4th edition? I'm reserving my opinion on gnomes until I get to read their stuff. But gnomes coming back after 20 plus years is pretty crazy. Alright, so let's go ahead and get looking at the armies here. Let's start with the Empire for Dosict, one of our moderators. He's got a great cannon. Looks like we've got 2 units of halberdiers. He's got a steam tank, 2 units of crossbows, 3 units of swordsmen, a unit of handgunners, a unit of great swords, the Royal Altdorf Griffites, a witch hunter, and then Balthazar Gelt with final transmutation, searing doom, and transmutation of lead. And looks like that's everything. So pretty decent army designed to deal with a lot of potential scenarios. Meanwhile, over here we have another very large dwarf army, and he's brought a cannon and a bolt thrower to the table. No, 2 cannons and a bolt thrower to the table. He's also got 4 units of longbeards, 2 units of miners with blasting charges, 2 units of rangers, 1 unit of warriors. Are these all longbeards? Damn. 3 units of thunderers, the dragonback slayers, 2 units of dwarf warriors, excuse me. This is going to be a pretty interesting fight. Oh, and his army is led by, we got a Rune Lord, Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin, and a Rune Smith with the regular Rune of Wrath and Ruin. Alright, we're off. So, Dosict is definitely going to have to be pretty aggressive here. He only has 1 artillery piece, whereas the dwarves have 3. And not to mention, it's 2 cannons and a bolt thrower, which are very well designed for... very well designed for dealing with enemy artillery. So this is going to be pretty tricky. So both armies are beginning to line up. Dosict is going to need to be careful because his steam tank could also get completely eviscerated by that enemy shooting. If I were him, I would probably move the steam tank up so I could hit like the Thunderers, but stay out of range of the cannons and just do my best to start mowing people down. We do see Gelt soaring on in. I'm guessing he's trying to build up for an overcast final transmutation. He does need to be very careful though. There is so much shooting here that if Gelt isn't cautious, he could easily just get completely obliterated. Oh, what are you doing? Okay, here we see him going for kind of an interesting target. So he gets an overcast final transmutation, but he kind of just whiffs. Like, sure, it's going to kill some Thunderers, but he only hit a single unit. So that's pretty unfortunate. Looks like Outer Region just sort of walked out of the way. Meanwhile, looks like the different units are firing at each other. I apologize about the barking. There's something apparently super exciting going on outside. Alright, meanwhile, we've got cannons coming in over here on Rangers. Miners look like they ran forward to try and throw off some blasting charges, but have already been pushed back. The steam tank has taken a fair amount of damage. It's okay for the moment, but it's nearing that 50%, though it's getting some work done. If I were Dosict, I'd probably do my best to try and focus the war machines between the steam tank and the cannon. Just try and get them offline. Like, if he's going to focus the steam tank, he should probably try and take advantage of that by trying to get rid of his artillery. Here we see Gelt did try and call down a Searing Doom, but Outer Region is paying very close attention and just immediately moved out of the way. Here we do see the front lines are about to collide, but there is just a ton of shooting and a ton of blasting charges coming in. And I don't know how Dosik's going to bounce back from this. He does have the Royal Altdorf Griffites coming around the back, but it's not... Outer Region looks like he's paying very close attention. And here we can already see that he's completely reforming his line. Thunders are beginning to turn around. Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin goes down to slow these guys and start doing damage. And in comes just a ton of missile fire. Looks like the front line is going slightly in favor of the Dwarves, actually. They've already beaten off 2 units of swordsmen. That was phrasing, Sotek. But in any event, sorry, swordsmen and great swords might be able to push to the front line, but there's just so much shooting here. I don't see how the Empire is going to be able to get through this. This is something we've seen a lot in the last 2 or 3 weeks, is dwarves building layered armies where you have like a front line of miners, a front line of shields, a line of shooting, another line of shooting, and then like a war machine. The dwarves have done that for like the last 2 or 3 weeks, which granted is only allowed them to win 1 week, but you know, it's something that I think people are going to have to be cautious of and start building for in the future, because a lot of people don't have the proper tools to deal with it. That being said, the dwarves have only won 1 week. They got their faces smashed in a fair amount of times. And in the event, the front line of the Empire is completely gone at this point. I don't really know what the Empire can do, really, to turn this in their favor. The steam tank is already dead. All of the dwarf war machines are still online. Gelt looks like he's coming in to maybe try and get some work done, but I really just don't see how the Empire could possibly turn this around in their favor. The great swords have been killed to a man, not even given the dignity of being able to flee from the battlefield, or the dignity, or the mercy, I should say. Here, the Dragonback Slayers, I mean, they're basically at full health. They're coming in on Gelt and the Witch Hunter, who are being attacked from all sides, so yeah, I'd say it's pretty much game for this one. Not really a whole lot else to say in this particular matchup. Gelt's trying to get out of there, but I think was he hit by a friendly cannonball? Did anybody else see that? It looks like an Empire cannonball hit him when trying to get into this unit. And that's game. Oof, brutal game for the Empire. That's hard. You know, this was an Empire build that was kind of designed to deal with like most varied opponents, and the dwarves just took a very specific build that, like, if you can't surround and outnumber that build, it's just brutal. Alright, so let's go ahead and update the thing here. Good game to both players. That's such a hard matchup for Empire as it is, and that was literally like a perfectly designed dwarf army to deal with an Empire list. It's just like, ugh, wolf. Alright, so we have a dwarf mirror match coming up. So no matter what, the dwarves will lose, but also win. Alright, next up, we've got Redo versus a Move Hacker. And we're off to the Altdorf outskirts. Oh, Dosik, you did your best. That's a super hard matchup. That is a super hard matchup. You demand, Lore Master, when do you expect the next FSO DLC? Thanks, Dark Hardline. I appreciate the kind words. I am hoping to see the Lizardman Skaven DLC in late March, early April. That's my prediction right now. Hey, St. Augustine, how you doing? Check on. Oh, there he is. All right, now we've got Dark Elves versus Dwarves. Not to spoil anything for anyone, but it's just dwarves all the way down today. There are a ton of dwarf players this week. Alright, and here we go. Alrighty. So let's start with the Dwarves, who have been pretty successful this week, which good for them. Dwarves have struggled a lot in previous weeks. In any event, we've got, let's see, 4 units of Dwarf Warriors, 2 units of Longbeards, 2 units of Iron Drakes with Trollhammer Torpedoes, 1 unit of regular Iron Drakes. We've got the Dragonback Slayers. We've got a Rune Lord who's completely naked. He has no runes whatsoever. We've got Ulthar's Raiders, 4 units of Miners with Blasting Charges, 3 units of Thunderers. So, super wide Dwarf army. You know, they've got like the cheapest general they can get, and that's it. Other than that, they are totally naked. Meanwhile, on the Dark Elf side of things, we've got Redo bringing in a Reaper Bolt Thrower, a Sorceress of Beast with Flock of Doom, Flock of Doom, and Transformation of Caden. We've got, looks like, 2 units of Spears, 4 units of Bleak Swords, 2 units of Black Ark Corsairs with Handbows, 2 units of Witch Elves, or excuse me, 3 units of Dread Spears. We've also got, looks like, a unit of Dark Riders with shields. We've got Hellebrand on foot with Witchbrew, Gaze of Cain, and her lovely sword. We've got a unit of Hargoneth Executioners hiding over in the forest. And then we've got the Raven Heralds up in the sky. So this will be a pretty interesting matchup. This Dwarf army is super duper wide. It always is a little nerve-wracking having such a little amount of leadership, and they don't have any artillery. So the Dark Elves can force the Dwarves to come to them, which actually could work out really well in the Dwarves' favor. Redo is such a pessimist. Is KFC more popular than Popeyes and Chick-fil-A in Texas? I don't know about that. Chick-fil-A is super fucking popular down here. Alright, so we see the Bolt Throwers have already started opening fire, and they're putting some damage on the Iron Drake with Trollhammer Torpedoes, which is probably not necessarily the best opponent to focus because they don't really have a lot of what the hell? What was that even shooting at? Huh. Those are some pretty miserable shots. I mean, he doesn't really have a lot of large targets. I think it'd be better to probably focus like the regular Iron Drakes. Oh, that's the Scolder Guard. That's no regular Iron Drakes. Yeah, that's who I would probably definitely be focusing with a single shot bolt thrower. Oh, there he actually gets a decent shot. But man, that bolt thrower is terrible. I mean, I've seen a lot of bolt throwers, but shoot, and some of them do really well. But this one's not great. They probably need to back the hell up. Like, seems kind of silly to just sacrifice that unit for nothing, but I guess we'll see what happens. Over here, we do see the Raven Heralds have started opening with some pot shots into the miners with blasting charges, but the Thunderers and the miners are going to completely obliterate this unit, probably without even trying that hard. And we do see the Dark Elves are pulling back pretty heavily. They are going to have to be careful not to pull back too much, because the Dark Elves do have to technically remain as an attacker, and because he just totally abandoned this bolt thrower, like... he only is going to be able to count as the attacker until this bolt thrower breaks and starts running away, and then, like, I'll give him about probably 7 or 8 seconds, but he's going to need either to be attacking with the Raven Heralds or his Cav. Granted, the Dwarves also have to engage, especially since this unit is shattered, so, like, they need to start moving towards each other. Here, though, no, the Raven Heralds are in range, though, so they're good. Because clearly, I mean, clearly the Dark Elves want the Dwarves to come to them so they can take advantage of this forest to bring out these Hargonath Executioners. Dwarves are rearranging just a little bit, though they do need to begin attacking probably in the next 8 seconds, or else I'm going to post a message. Is he in range of shooting? Yeah, he is. Okay. Always have to keep an eye on Dwarf players. Alright, so the Dark Elf front line is running in. The initial miner blasting charge volley goes down and just absolutely obliterates that unit of Bleak Swords. Those Raven Heralds actually did a ton of damage with that volley. So those, I mean, they are pretty decent armor-piercing shots, so they come in and, yeah, knock out about 5 to 8% health on each volley, so that's not too bad. So the Dark Elves are beginning to completely engage. We do have these Witch Elves hauling butt for these Thunderers, though if they get a full volley from these blasting charges, it is going to be a pretty bad time. Probably would be good to probably try and get down a Manticore as quickly as possible to just like start swooping in and causing havoc. Looks like the Skulder Guard are almost offline thanks to the Raven Heralds, but the Skulder Guard kind of have done their job. Didn't even take that much of a volley. Well, they are being supported by Thunderers. Where are those Executioners? Okay, the Executioners are coming around the flank. We do see the Dark Riders here get into Ulthar's Raiders. Bleak Swords have managed to get ahead with Hellebrand. If the Bleak Swords can actually get on these Dragonback Slayers, and the Dark Riders can just keep making a mess around here, the Dark Elves actually could swing this flank pretty heavily in their favor. We do see here that the Raven Heralds are almost out of ammo, which is kind of pitiful. I feel like the Raven Herald should have like nearly infinite ammo. Here we do see the Gaze of Cain go down, which is going to allow these Witch Elves to probably tear a pretty good chunk into those Longbeards, though that is kind of a hard matchup for them due to the high melee defense and armor of the Longbeards, but it's going okay for them. Another pretty good Flock of Doom goes down here, doing some pretty considerable damage, and Hellebrand does manage to cause a little bit of problems around here. She does need to get out of here, though, very, very quickly. She needs to get on that Rune Lord and take him out. Right now, she's pretty isolated just because there's Ulthar's Raiders comboed with... those Dragonback Slayers are a death kill for her. She needs to get the fuck out of there. Here we do see the Executioners have managed to get Murderous Prowess, and they do jump on the Thunderers, but they are being supported by Ulthar's Raiders, who have popped Marked by Ulthar, which is going to do a ton of damage. It's going to hurt super badly. The Raven Heralds are in here and are pretty much out of ammo. Probably the best thing for the Raven Heralds would be either to fly in to give Hellebrand enough support to get out of here, or maybe to fly in on... oh, that's Curse of Anra here, not the Manticore summon. I totally read the wrong thing. So, Curse of Anra here, pretty interesting pick. I was totally expecting it to be Transformation of Caden just because that's so popular right now. Things are looking pretty rough for the Dark Elves, though. I mean, they did meet along a very, very wide engagement, and it just doesn't look like they're positioned well enough to be able to take full advantage of it. We do see the Raven Heralds come down here to try and take these Trollhammer Torpedoes offline. The Hargonath Executioners have managed to deal with Ulthar's Raiders, and the Thunderers fall quickly afterwards. But I don't like the Dark Elves are doing really well on this flank, but it almost seems like the Dark Elves met the Dwarves a little too wide. Because one of the tricky things about these super wide dwarf armies is it's almost better to come in really heavy on one flank and try and completely overwhelm the dwarves from the side, and take advantage of the fact that the dwarves are typically using mass low tier infantry instead of like lots of good or having any like really good core units. Here though, we do see the Dark Elves are continuing to push hard on this flank. Unfortunately, there are some Trollhammer torpedoes that need to get taken offline here, though the Skulder Guard are being wrapped up by Bleak Swords, and these Dread Spears are rapidly approaching these Iron Drakes with torpedoes. If they can actually get these torpedoes offline for a minute and get these 2 last Thunder units engaged, if the Dark Elves could turn this into a pure all-out fight, I actually do think they could win this fairly easily. They have vastly superior infantry thanks to the Hargoneth Executioners alone. I just wouldn't fall for this trap. Just ignore the Rune Lord. Just keep pressing onto these ranged units and focusing them down to the best of your ability. Because if you try and kill the Rune Lord, then you're going to get wrapped around him, and it's just a really juicy trap. Like right now, because you're thinking to yourself, oh, I'm taking out the enemy leadership, but it just doesn't matter against this kind of dwarf army. Against this kind of dwarf army, it's so much more important to just get all these shooting units offline as quickly as possible. Because if you can take the dwarf shooting offline, their melee core is not even remotely good enough to deal with this entire Dark Elf army. They could, you know, if these Executioners had just kept pushing into the Thunderers and just kept dragging them along, and maybe hopefully have Hellbrand run around the back and swing into these Thunderers. You know, there's a salvageable situation in that. Granted, I don't think it's super likely just because the Dark Elves are already being weighed down super heavy. But, yeah, it's a rough situation. We do see another Flock of Doom come down over here. Probably would have been better to go a little further back and focus on these larger units. But Hellbrand has been enraged. Looks like she popped Witch Brew out of desperation for a buff. But that's going to get her surrounded by the Dragonback Slayers, who unfortunately are a super good pick against her because she doesn't have... She has decent melee defense, but she of course has no armor whatsoever, and the Dragonback Slayers are just designed to murder shit with low armor. We do see the handbows trading some more fire, but unfortunately the handbows don't have very good armor piercing on their missile attacks. They don't have the high AP ratios you would want or expect on like repeater crossbows. So this is actually a really, really close... This was a fairly close game. And I really think the Dark Elves had an opportunity to turn it in their favor, especially because they managed to get those Executioners all the way around the flank without them being noticed or targeted. But in the end, it's, you know, this type of dwarf army, if you're fighting against it and you are, you know, especially if you're showing up to an all-comers list, you cannot afford to make any mistakes, and the only thing that should matter in your life is getting those ranged units off the field. Like, just breaking them and making sure they shatter and, you know, are gone completely. Because if those ranged units stay even remotely online, then they're going to get just stupid amounts of value. And because you can fight that melee dwarf infantry all day, and it just doesn't matter. Like, none of these dwarves matter. Like, all this, totally useless. This is, like, all of the army's killing power, and without this, like, the dwarf army, you could grind it down. So, it's just a super hard matchup. Alright, so let's move to... So we've got more dwarves. I think this may be the first time we have, like, a complete... like single race finals. Alright, so for our last game, we've got Megafish versus King. Alright, and have dwarves ever established a Karak in Nagaroth? No, no, no. It's way too far away for them. Dwarves are not good at crossing oceans. That is not something the Dawi exceed at. They don't have any Karaks if they have to cross the ocean to get there. Do I know some fun facts about the dwarves? Some fun facts about the dwarves? Yes, here's a fun fact. So, there's something that the Dawi have, I think it's called a Rukraz, But basically, when dwarves have an argument about like mining rights or who has access to something or some goofy scenario like that, one of the things that can come up is they'll have what's called a rukraz, which I mentioned earlier, and it's an informal shouting contest. And literally the way it works, let's go to Iron Sand Desert. Everybody likes Iron Sand Desert. Iron. Boop. And in a rukraz, or if that's the name for it, I'd have to double check. So I may be getting the name wrong, but basically it's an informal shouting contest that you shout insults at each other, and the way you win is you keep shouting insults until one of the parties gets so offended that they quit. But there's a lot of nuance to these shouting contests, because if you shout something that's too insulting at the enemy clan, they might declare a grudge against you, or it could turn into an all-out fight, and they might try and like kill each other. So it's this very careful balance about giving enough of an ugly insult that your opponent surrenders, but not so much of an insult that it turns into a fight. And Captain Rafi, thank you for the double donation, man. Really appreciate it. There's your fun dwarf fact for your funny dwarf fact for a day. Another fun fact, actually. Did you know that for emergency situations and rations, the reason miners wear hats instead of like something a little more, one of the big reasons they wear hats, I should say. Obviously they wear it for protection, but their hats are designed so that they can keep a piece of cheese underneath their hat, and they wear their hats with cheese underneath it. So if they ever have like a cave-in or something, that's their emergency rations. It's called chuff, I think. There's a dwarf word for it. Alright, so this is today's last prelim matchup. And, oh, here's something different. Megafish has brought an Anvil of Doom Rune Lord, and he's got all the goodies. He's got all 3 of his master runes. He's also got 2 cannons. He's got, looks like 3 units of Longbeards, the Grumbling Guard, 1 unit of Iron Drakes with Trollhammer Torpedoes, 4 units of Thunderers, 2 units of Master with blasting charges, and Norgumling's Ironbreakers. So a very, very elite and tiny dwarf army compared to everything else we've seen today, which could be kind of dangerous for the dwarves, because in these tournaments they tend to do better when they go mass infantry. So we'll have to see how a more elite force does. Meanwhile, we already see some trickery from the Vampire Coast, who has some scurvy dogs in the very back, along with another unit up here in the front. He also has 2 war machines, but he has mortars instead of cannons. Interesting. King of the Dead also has 5 units of zombie pirate deckhand mobs, one of which is the Tide of Skjold. He's got 4 units of zombie pirate gunnery bombers, which is pretty interesting. I haven't really seen anybody take these guys in mass. I have heard that the shotguns are very, very good lately, but I haven't seen people take bombers before today. We also have, looks like, 3 units of zombie pirate deckhand mods with polearms. Then we have Count Noctilus, the usual pick with his typical build assortment, Wraith Storm, the Moondial, and then his Summon and Heal. Then we have a single group of Mourngulls and a Rotting Leviathan. So I definitely think... Oh, there's 3 groups of scurvy dogs. 2 in the back, 1 in the front. I definitely think this fight favors the Dwarves, just because they have a ton of firepower with that double cannon. And they don't... You know what's funny? This build, I think, would have been very, very good against any of the other Dwarf armies we've seen today due to their mass infantry. But of course, the one army that King of the Dead ends up going up against is an elite Dwarf army, not a mass Dwarf army. And I think that might be bad for him. But we'll have to see. Could I do a series on lore of the old world? Dark Hardline, I feel like that's kind of my entire channel in a nutshell. Like, unless you're like asking for a specific subject, but like that's kind of what I do. Dark Hardline, sorry I'm new. Oh, it's all good, brother. You don't need to apologize. There's tons of stuff. Like one series that I'm going to be continuing very soon. Well, a lot of series are about to be continuing very soon with the big thing I have coming up. But like if you want like just a pure lore dump, one of the things you might like to see is we have like a geography series. This is probably line camping. Doesn't seem like corner camping to me. I mean, there's plenty of room to maneuver around the dwarf lines on both sides. It's certainly not the nicest setup, but it doesn't seem abusive to me. Like, you could easily fit entire squads between them. Here, though, we do see that King of the Dead is off to a really strong, good start. He has already taken one of the cannons offline with his scurvy dogs, and it looks like another one's about to follow up if the dwarves are not careful. Looks like the dwarves are going to have to start moving forward. If that other cannon goes down, then the dwarves are going to be forced to come out. They obviously just can't sit back there if they don't have war machines to allow them to... Holy crap, that scurvy dog unit got literally evaporated. But one of the cannons did get completely wiped out. Like, it shattered. It's totally gone. We do see another scurvy dog unit jumps in on this cannon. If he can shatter this other cannon, this could be a awesome catch for the Vampire Coast. We do see the cannon goes down. If he can manage to shatter it, that's all he needs. But the dwarves are investing a ton of resources, and there it is. It's gone. So, yep, now the Vampire Coast can sit back, crack their knuckles, and not have to do jack shit. Because they have mortars, so the dwarf line has to engage. So now all of the weight of the scenario is totally in favor of the Vampire Coast. So really, really expert play by King of the Dead there. Just effectively using those 3 units of scurvy dogs completely wiped out those cannons. So we do see the dwarves are now starting to make their way forward. One of the Thunderer units has gotten very, very isolated from the rest of its army, and it's being chased down by a summoned unit of zombies. And it looks like the Morghuls are about to head out to pay them a visit. Here we do see that the dwarves are getting a taste of their own glorious medicine. Is everyone getting some sweet, sweet catharsis by seeing the miners with blasting charges get hit with blasting charges? Is that providing... What do they call it in German? Schadenfreude? When seeing another suffering brings you joy. Yeah, these miners with blasting charges are pretty much taken offline. We do see that the mortars are continuing to pound away at the Dawi. Unfortunately, they're not the most accurate machines, but they are getting value, which is all that really effectively matters. There are 4 Thunderers on the table, and if the Thunderers can get taken offline, then I really don't see how the Vampire Coast could possibly lose this after that, because they can just kind of easily wipe stuff out. You see, oh, really nice shot right there from that mortar. And it looks like the mortars are focusing fire, accidentally hitting the miners there. This unit of Thunderers, yeah, they're doomed now because they've run out of support line. They've run out of support range from these Thunderers, which means the Morghuls are going to be able to get to go crazy on them. Here we do see parts of the Vampire Coast line are starting to move forward along with Noctilus and the Bombers, but King of the Dead is playing very, very defensively, just taking his sweet time with this. This is definitely going to be a slow... This is going to not be the fastest of battles. Here we do see the Longbeards jump in against the zombie pirate deckhand mobs, and bombs are already coming in to provide support. Noctilus is moving forward a bit, which I hope King is being careful because he doesn't want to get too aggressive with Noctilus, because although Noctilus will have no problem dealing with these two units because they do no armor piercing, I just worry about him getting too close to the Grumbling Guard, who could actually take him out for breakfast. In any event, the Iron Drake, the Trollhammer torpedoes, are now being chased off successfully by these double units, which means that the Rotting Leviathan has full leeway to come in here and start just ground pounding people. Basically spamming down B like Donkey Kong in Smash Brothers. I'm hip, I just made a reference. Here we do see the Iron Drakes are trying to swing around the side so they can maybe provide some support, but the Rotting Leviathan seems to have detected that and is like, nope, I'm going to go ahead and back up. Noctilus is continuing to get summons out, and fire is still raining from the heavens to help deal with this Thunder unit, who unfortunately have boxed up a little too well, which means that the mortar gets really effective shots against them, and they are taking so much damage. This unit has broken due to the Morgels, and they're going to gladly just chase these guys off until they shatter, and this Thunder unit is probably going to follow their fate very, very quickly. Meanwhile, we do see the Rotting Leviathan has jumped in against the Rune Lord, and he does have all of his runes popped, keeping him safe for the moment, but he counts as a large entity, actually, and he's surrounded by pole arms, who have armor piercing and anti-large, along with the Rotting Leviathan, who does a ton of damage, and they're going to be able to make they're going to be able to tear this Rune Lord apart. But the Iron Drakes do step forward to help provide some support and get a really good volley against the Rotting Leviathan. But he does manage to pull back and avoid the worst of the damage, despite the fact that he was a moving target. And we see that Noctilus seemingly has decided he's kind of had enough of that, and does bring down a Wraith Storm, which is going to do a little bit of damage, but more importantly, kind of knock these guys around so that they're, if they try and reform to shoot at the Rotting Leviathan, it'll take some time. And it's a perfect timing, too, because this Rotting Leviathan is coming for their biscuits, and he's not going to take no for an answer. Meanwhile, we see that the Morgels have almost finished shattering this unit of Thunders, but the Mortars have also broken this unit, and things are looking very, very dire for the Dawi. The only units they've really managed to effectively eliminate are either units that have spent all their ammo or units that have been completely summoned. Here we do see the Iron Drakes do actually manage to get away from the Rotting Leviathan thanks to the swooping in support of another unit of Thunderers, also the Grumbling Guard and all this stuff. And the Rotting Leviathan is trying to push back from them, but the Grumbling Guard are very heavy. And this summoned unit gets absolutely obliterated by these minor slip blasting charges. So the Dwarves are actually doing a pretty good job of defending their little pocket of the battlefield that they still do control. Here we see Norgrimling's Ironbreakers have gone up against Count Noctilus himself, and they're down to about half health. They do take a surprising amount of damage from the double-sided blasting charges, and the Tide of Skuld is obviously helping out. The Rotting Leviathan does pull back out of Iron Drake range, and these guys are the only true threat left on the battlefield. If King of the Dead can get these Trollhammer torpedoes, either with a Moondial summon or by just like catching them with a unit, this is like the best scenario that he could really hope for. We do see that this Thunderer unit that the Morgels were chasing very, very hard and effectively just never shattered despite being so heavily pressured, and did actually manage to rally into safely, but it doesn't look like the Dwarf player Megafish has noticed that just yet. It seems like he's probably keeping most of his attention on the Rotting Leviathan. Over here, we do see the Thunderers are continuing to take damage from the Mortars, who... How many kills have they managed to get? They've got 23 and 19 kills, which isn't bad for how cheap of a unit they are, and they're actually doing pretty solid leadership damage. Here we do see all of the Thunderer units have rallied and gotten into vaguely safe positions, and it looks like the Morgels are trying to decide where they would be best situated to help in this battle. I probably would try and send the Morgels off to help get rid of just this pocket of Dawi over here, so they're not keeping the balance of power artificially inflated. And here the Rune Lord with Megafish actually makes a super dangerous decision going into battle here against Count Noctilus, which is so dangerous because Count Noctilus does have really, really good armor piercing and anti-large damage, and does call in a Wraith Storm, which actually knocks him over. Oh, nope, that was just him jumping in the air. I just saw his legs wiggling. But Noctilus is going to be able to absolutely spear this guy and just... Noctilus is going to kick the shit out of him. That's kind of what I'm trying to say. But he's also being provided with support from these blasting charges, who are making sure to allow these dwarves not to completely surround Noctilus. Though these zombies do need to charge in soon, and I have no idea what just happened there. Okay, it looks like Megafish surrendered. Okay. Well, and that's game. Alright. That's fair. Alright, so the Dawe made a valiant effort, but like Noctilus was just up in their business. Like it looked like the Iron Drakes had been completely shut down by that point, and surrounded by the were being pursued by the Rotting Leviathan. So I'm guessing they either broke or something along those lines. After that, there was still a nearly full health unit of Morghuls running around, doing as they please. So there was nothing the dwarves could have done to win that, especially since the Rune Lord was just about to die to Noctilus. So I think that's fair. Alright, so now we've got Hazard versus Outer Region. So we've got a Dwarf mirror match. Boop. And let's go to... What's a good map? We just fought in the desert. So looking at my list here, let's go to Excavation Site. That's a fun one. So we've got a Dawi Civil War. Karak Kadrin versus Karazakarak. By the way, for anyone in chat that's not used to Ninja Hunt, please be aware that he is a residential troll that just comes around and makes a habit out of acting like a rude goof for the sake of it. Don't worry, if he was actually someone who's legitimately mean, I would have banned him a long time ago. He's a known individual around these parts. It's just her performance. Where's my phone? Oh. All right. Oh, there it is. We're doing good on time today. Alright, so just in case you missed these armies earlier today, we've got a Karak Kadrin list that's very fire themed. We've got 4 units of miners with blasting charges, 2 units of Iron Drakes, 2 units of Iron Drakes with Trollhammer torpedoes, 2 units of Longbeards with great weapons, 3 units of Dwarf Warriors, 2 units of Dwarf Warriors, 1 unit of Longbeards. We've got 2 Thanes that both have the Rune of Slowness in Ironbeard's Ring, which gives them nearby enemies fire weakness of 22%. We've got a Rune Lord with the Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin, and the Dragonback Slayers. Meanwhile, on the other Dawi side, we've got 2 cannons, a front line of, I believe, 4 Longbeards and 2 Dwarf Warriors. Yep. We've got 3 units of Thunderers, 2 units of Rangers, a Bolt Thrower, the Dragonback Slayers, and he also has 2 units of Miners with Blasting Charges, and then he has a Runesmith and a Rune Lord, both of which have Wrath and Ruin. And here we can already see some sneaky shenanigans coming up from Karak Kadrin, and we'll have to see if it's enough to turn the tide in their favor. I need to grab my phone charger real back. Oh, sorry guys. Forgot the screen. Boop. And the game may start, but I have to do something. Well, I'll be back in just a sec. Alright, and we're off. Sorry, I had to answer a call from my wonderful aunt. Alright, so the battle has begun. Looks like Karak Kadrin's already up to some sneaky shenanigans coming up the back. We'll have to see if the Dawi of Everpeak notice it in time. Meanwhile, the War Machines have opened fire. Looks like they're starting to put shots into the Thunderers, which is an excellent target. That is definitely high priority, but the Dwarves have made sure to stretch themselves as wide as possible so that they limit the effectiveness of that. We do see the Rangers have opened fire on the Thane, but the odds of them hurting him are very, very low. He does have 120 armor and a bronze shield, so they're basically just shooting at a brick wall for all he cares. He does run into these miners with blasting charges, and it looks like he's going to try and prevent them from shooting, but he gets there a little late, unfortunately. But these Longbeards kind of just shrugged off those blasting charges. Here we see an exchange of gifts from the 2 Dwarf holds, and it goes about predictably well. In any event, we do see the Dwarves here from the forest have arrived, and it looks like they're going to be hurling their blasting charges into these cannons, which should effectively take it offline with a single volley. I almost think it would have been better to go for the Thunderers instead, but we'll have to see if it does a good enough job here. They do some actually really good damage. There was like a really random sudden spike in there, but it looks like they get off about 2 volleys. They could actually survive for a good bit. I'd probably go for the Thunderers instead at this point. Here we do see the Dwarves have managed to break through this initial front line, and hopefully we'll be able to keep pressing forward. These miners are out of ammo, so they're running in to fight Longbeards. These miners look like they're run forward and are throwing their blasting charges into the Thunderers, which this isn't necessarily a bad situation because it is allowing the Dwarves of Karak Kadrin over here to get closer for their engagement. These Iron Drakes would probably be really good to turn around and blast these miners in the back, which would allow them to just kind of break instantly. So these miners could chase them off and the Dawi could just keep pushing forward with all haste. We do see the Dragonback Slayers have arrived along the front line. They are going to eat a ton of missile fire, but they do have the equivalent of bronze shields due to their whirling axes, so they might be able to mitigate some of the damage. Meanwhile, we do see that the firing lines are beginning to meet up. The Iron Drake with Trollhammer torpedoes are definitely going to suffer in trying to do effective damage. And here, there's actually a really good catch here by the Dwarfs of Karak Kadrin as they sandwich this Thunderer line between the Slayers and the Miners. So they should be effectively able to tear this unit in half and do a ton of damage to it. But things are looking pretty dicey for the Dawi of Karak Kadrin. Their surprise attack is beginning to falter now. This cannon has been allowed to get back online, and these cannons are super deadly to the Dwarves of Karak Kadrin. They need to get them offline. But not all is lost. This Thane did manage to take down a unit of Thunderers, so he probably should just pursue them and do his best to see them off the battlefield, because Thunderers are the most important thing in this matchup, quite frankly. We do see Longbeards with great weapons, support Thunderers, and Iron Drakes all now running forward. These Iron Drakes would be very, very helpful, pouring their fire into these Dragonback Slayers over here. That would be a very, very ideal target, though getting these Rangers offline would not be bad either. We do see the Rune Lord has finally arrived on this layer of the battlefield, and we do see the initial flamethrowers do go in on the Rangers, and holy shit! Wow, that did about 75% of their health in one volley, and they are getting the hell out of dodge, and I can't blame them. Woof! That was deadly. Meanwhile, these Iron Drakes over here do have Dwarf Warriors rapidly approaching. If they can, a nice fiery volley into this group might be enough to slow them down and get them off their back. They do have a Thane nearby, which means they are going to be doing considerable bonus damage, but unfortunately they had this big obnoxious hill in the way of their firing line, which is going to hurt them. Here we do see two Thunderers exchanging fire with the Iron Drakes, which is obviously not an ideal matchup for the Iron Drakes. I actually would probably tell these Iron Drakes to go into melee mode against the Thunderers, because they have pretty much the same stat line, but the Iron Drakes just have way more armor, so I think they could actually beat the Thunderers in a melee battle, but who could say for sure? I've never seen that actually happen in a game, so that's just a theory. A game theory. Anyway, so meanwhile over here, the Dawi leadership of both sides has begun to exchange fire, but it's in a pretty nasty part of the battlefield. Both of the cannons are still up and firing, which is not looking good for the Dwarves of Karakadren, and they are being kind of chased all over the battlefield. We do have a Thane here who's running back to maybe get this Thunderer unit offline. If he could get these Thunderers offline, the Dawi might be able to rally the situation. The Dwarves of Everpeak do have a better leadership situation going on, and both cannons are up and running, which are super deadly. If this Rune Lord could take this cannon out, that would be super nice to just get it off the field. Looks like this Thane is approaching this group of Thunderers and might be able to take it out. These miners did manage to get another group of Thunderers off the battlefield, at least for the moment, which is a really solid grab. Looks like this Rune Lord is wailing on this cannon, trying to bring it down. The Trollhammer torpedoes should probably turn and start firing at this situation, because the odds of them hitting something is extremely high. The bolt thrower only has about 2 shots left, and it's going to be out of ammunition. The Longbeards, the great weapons over here, are still actually doing pretty well. They're fighting against a regular group of Longbeards, which is not the most ideal matchup. Meanwhile, over here, we do have some regular Longbeards coming in to support these Iron Drakes, which can get these Dwarf Warriors off of them, and these Longbeards will win in the long run, so these Iron Drakes don't need to wait, or don't need to support there. If anything, these Iron Drakes need to get the hell over here to this fight right here and start spewing fire into all these guys surrounding this Thane, taking advantage of his 22% local debuff to dealing with fire damage. Here we do have a Thane surrounded by Rangers, but he needs to get the hell out of this fight. These guys don't have any ammunition. They are not a worthy opponent. He needs to move immediately over here into these Thunderers and just keep pressuring this block of units to get off the battlefield. Meanwhile, over here we have a disagreement among Rune Lords, as these two are bopping each other with their hammers in the face. But one of them was smart enough to bring an attendant, which is going to give him an advantage in this little duel, and we can see that with the health differentiation there. Meanwhile, these cannons, at least, yeah, both cannons are still online and pumping shots, and it looks like Everpeak is definitely going to be claiming the victory over the long haul, unless these Thanes can somehow turn the battle in their favor, but I really, really doubt it. We do have a lot of Longbeards still engaging across the battle, and these Dwarf Warriors somehow managed to scoot away. I'm not sure how they did that. It looks like maybe... No, I guess there must have been a Longbeard unit over here I missed, because they're still managing to pursue these Iron Drakes. But I don't really know if there's a lot the Iron Drakes can do at this point. The battlefield is so far against them. There's still 2 cannons up with decent amounts of ammunition, and the leadership structure for Everpeak is much, much healthier than the leadership structure for Karakadren. If both of the cannons would actually turn and start firing at the Rune Lord, it's likely they would be able to bring him down exceptionally quick. Meanwhile, this Thane is like fighting as hard as he can, but he's so surrounded now by enemy troops. I just don't know if there's enough he's going to be able to accomplish, even with his amazing 4 foot off the ground kick. The Thane back there looks like he's about to break, and if that thing goes down, I think it's more than likely going to trigger army losses as the leadership structure begins to collapse in on itself, especially with this thing having such being surrounded. So that thing is broken, and he's got too many units on him for him to have any hope of rallying, and it's really just down to Rune Lord and the Thane now, which I don't think them alone are going to be able to turn the tide in their favor. We can enjoy them trying for a second, though. Like, those Thanes are definitely putting in work, but yeah, the massive amount of artillery coming in from the Everpeak army is just too much. And it looks like that's army losses and game. So Dwarves won and Dwarf lost. Good game to both players, but the flamethrower, the Firewatch edition of the Dwarves was just not enough. Just not enough. So let's go ahead and update the screen one more time. And this time I'll be sure to move it before I do anything else. So Outer Region has moved up to the finals. And now we've got King of the Dead's Vampire Coast against a Move Hackers Dawe. And go ahead and punt both of them. King, and you're up. And for this one, we're off to a favorite of Turin's, I believe, which is the Pillar of Bone. Excuse me for a moment, chat. Yeah, people have played Beastmen, but Beastmen have not managed to win one of these yet. They've done okay depending on the week, but most the Beastmen players tended to have luck where like Beastmen would show up and like the winner of that week would be a super Lizardman army, or would be like a hyper elite high elf army, and the Beastmen would just get spanked. Alright, so we are on to the final semi-match battle. Lore Master, do a lore video on Kotak? Oh, you mean Kolak Suneater? Already did. front end. If you go to my Legendary Lord or Special Character playlist, you will find Codex Uneater on there. I'm good, Robert. All right, guys, let's go over the armies real quick, in case you missed them last time. So we've got 5 units of Zombie Pirate Decran mobs, one of which is the Tide of Skuld. We've got 3 units of pole arms. We've got 3 units of scurvy dogs, 4 units of bombers. We've got a single unit of Morghuls, 2 mortars, a rotting leviathan, and Count Noctilus with his usual kit. Meanwhile, on the dwarf end, we have 4 units of miners with blasting charges. We've got 3 units of thunderers, 2 units of iron drakes with trollhammer torpedoes. We've got the Skolder Guard. We've got 4 units of dwarf warriors, Ulthar's raiders, the Dragonback slayers, and a naked rune lord, along with 2 Longbeards in the back. Fritz, my estimation for the Lizardman Skaven DLC is early April, late March. That's my guess. I have nothing to back that up. It has to be before 3K, yes. It has to be before 3K, and it has to be early enough before 3K that it's not going to be like competing with it for sales. So I'm guessing they're going to try and have it out at least a month before. Alright, and we're off. So a move hacker does not have any artillery, so he's immediately jumping forward to begin fighting. We do see all the scurvy dog units look like they have been sighted, and they're kind of looking for openings, which King of the Dead's going to need to be careful. The mortars have opened fire on the miners, and oh boy, they did actually a buttload of damage to those miners, which makes sense. Miners actually have pretty good armor at 80, but they are still a pretty low tier unit with not a lot of health. So it does make sense that they would take a fair amount of damage. Looks like the Morghuls have been sighted, and the dogs are charging forward into the Thunderers. One of them does get caught by a unit of Longbeards, but we'll have to see if that works in their advantage for long. It looks like we have an exchange. We have a gift exchange here of bombs, and Iron Drake torpedoes have opened up into some zombie pirates, which doesn't really do anything. This definitely is ideal to trade bombs instead of trading the melee units with the bombs. But oh boy, the miners with blasting charges bombs are way stronger, but there are also far fewer of them, so that kind of makes sense. So all around, bombs are being exchanged in the new gift exchange program between the Dwarves and the Vampire Coast, and all the front lines are now charging into each other. Looks like pretty much all the miners have spent all of their ammo. These scurvy dogs do manage to run in on these Iron Drake Trollhammer torpedoes, likely trying to get them offline so that the big old rotting Leviathan can come in and do as it pleases. But they do get caught. That being said, they're only crumbling. They haven't completely fallen apart yet, so they're doing all right. We do see another unit over here is kind of... It seems like it's kind of waiting for a interesting target to go after. The Tide of Skuld does manage to break and defeat one of the miners with blasting charge units, but it eats a ton of missile damage, especially from the Skolder Guard, so it kind of gets torn apart before it's able to really capitalize on it. Meanwhile, we have Noctilus summoning additional units to help shore up this flank to keep the mortar active and firing, and it looks like the undead are trying to find an entrance to come harass people around here. The Skolder Guard are continuing to fire like crazy into all these different units, which the Skolder Guard are very, very spooky. and the Mongols do pursue forward to try and get some work done, but they get slapped by Markham Ulthar, and they need to get the fuck out of there because they're going to take so much damage because their missile resistance has just been nuked. But they are going to get a pretty sexy charge into these Thunderers. Going to knock a bunch of them around, and that will allow them to start regenerating, which is going to make up for the fact that they're taking increased damage. We do still have bombs coming in to support these zombie deckhand mobs, but I don't know if it's going to quite be enough. Things are looking pretty dicey for the Vampire Coast. Most of their front line has been completely degenerated or wiped out. We do have this Rotting Leviathan kind of maneuvering its way around the battlefield, and it does drop onto these Trollhammer torpedoes, trying to get them off the battlefield. The Mark of Ulthar has already been popped, so they don't need to worry about that. But these Mongols are completely wrapped up in Slayers and Thunderers, which is definitely not an ideal matchup they want to deal with. Noctilus did manage to jump on this Rune Lord and do a fair amount of damage, but like the front line of the Vampire Coast is completely gone. Like the only place where there are still zombies fighting is pretty much in this engagement right here, but like there's really not a whole lot else, and there's still so much shooting on the Dawi line that everything Noctilus summons actually has a pretty significant chance of being wiped out nearly instantly by supporting enemy fire. Reducing Noctilus coming in on this Rune Lord. If he could manage to kill the Rune Lord, that would eliminate all the leadership the Dwarves have from the battlefield, and he could potentially, thanks to the Rotting Leviathan, start causing mass terror checks across the battlefield and capitalize on that. But Rune Lords, and I'm speaking from unfortunate experience here, can be notoriously slippery, though Noctilus is doing a good job keeping up with him and smacking him in the back of the head with his halberd. The balance of power has started to go in favor of the Dwarves, though it's still pretty close to 50-50, most likely due to the Rotting Leviathan and Noctilus kind of single-handedly holding it up. We do see the mortars are continuing to fire into these various lines across the battlefield, trying to get some really effective work done, but that Rotting Leviathan is completely surrounded by unfriendly characters, and it's just going to make life super hard. And wow, that mortar shot was perfect to just kind of give Noctilus some space to run through, but unfortunately he spins it casting. The Rotting Leviathan does retreat a little bit to try and get into some more favorable area. We do see a Wraithstorm comes down, which does knock over the Rune Lord a little bit, but the mortars are starting to get torn apart, unfortunately, by the Trollhammer torpedoes. The zombies have been totally wiped out on this left flank, and Noctilus only needs maybe 2 more hits at most to kill this Rune Lord, but unfortunately he has a good chance of getting Last Samurai pretty hard. He needs to finish that guy off, but I don't see how he can remotely turn this around unless there is some miracle awaiting. But the Rune Lord has started to flee. Unfortunately, in this game, whenever units start running, like fleeing, it seems like they almost always get a speed boost. And Noctilus does turn to kind of run around and rejoin the battle here. It looks like he's going for the Slayers, who are unbreakable and a little bit more annoying than most other targets. They're going to struggle against Noctilus due to his high armor, but he does need to get involved in a combat, preferably a combat where he gets surrounded. That way enemy units can't shoot him, and he can kind of make the best use out of his extreme combat stats. But it's definitely going to be a super difficult situation. The Rune Lord is continuing to run. If Noctilus gets lucky, he'll run completely off the field, and maybe the undead will be able to somehow turn that in their favor. But like everywhere I look, there's just like another Thunderer unit just opening fire. We do see Marked by Ulthar goes down thanks to the Raiders, and there's a unit of Thunderers, a unit of Rangers, and Trollhammer torpedoes firing into it. And this Rune Lord, for no good reason, does rally way the hell over here in this forest. So not only is he rally, but he's totally hidden. So you can't even like pop a Wraithstorm on him to try and finish him off with Noctilus if he has any more Wraithstorms. So it's looking pretty dicey for the Vampire Coast. I don't think there's a realistic way that they can win this. There's just so many dwarves. There's so many dwarves, and dwarves just make an absolute joke out of big monsters like this if they, if their opponent doesn't know they're fighting dwarves. And here we see the Rotting Leviathan goes down, and that pretty much leaves Noctilus as the only thing left on the table. He's trying to get into battle, but King of the Dead has handed off with a surrender, which totally makes sense. It's a very, very, very difficult matchup. And we are going into a finals now of Dwarves versus Dwarves. Great games to both players. The Dawi definitely coordinated a system this week. Some people are definitely going to have to carefully keep in mind when they're designing their builds for next week. Who is it? Who else is in the finals? It's Outer Region. That's right. So for the first time since I have started this tournament series, we have a double mirror match in the same tournament. We've got a Move Hackers Dwarves versus Outer Regions Dwarves after we had a mirror match earlier, which is the first time that has ever happened. Pretty crazy. So let me get my map generator up here, and let's go to Mosquito Swamps for the final. All right, everyone. Whoop. Let me turn off the screen blocker here. This is the finals for today's tournament. Definitely a week of the Dawi, which is pretty amazing, honestly. Just thinking back to prior weeks, it's been very entertaining and interesting for me to see how the meta has shifted from week to week. But we'll have to see which Dawi is the true Dawi. We've got the War Machine heavy Dawi, and we've got the Mass Infantry heavy Dawi. We'll have to see which one comes out on top. So in case you're just now joining us for some reason, just to go over the matchups one last time. Over here with Outer Region, we've got two characters. We've got a Rune Lord and a Runesmith, both with Wrath and Ruin. We've got, I believe, 2 units of Dwarf Warriors and 4 units of Longbeards. The Dragonback Slayers. 3 units of Thunderers. 2 units of Miners with Blasting Charges. And 2 units of Rangers. We also have in the back line here a Bolt Thrower and 2 Cannons. Then over here we have no War Machines at all. We've got 4 units of Miners with Blasting Charges. 1, 2, 4 units of Dwarf Warriors. 2 units of Longbeards. 3 units of Thunderers. 2 units of Iron Drake Trollhammer Torpedoes. Ulthar's Raiders. 3 units of Thunderers. I might have already said that already. The Scolder Guard, Dragonback Slayers, and a single Rune Lord, who's totally naked. Ooh. Who will win? But regardless of who wins, we will have a new champion this week. So not a repeat champion. We've had our fair share of those, especially Falcon. Falcon has dominated this format a number of times. So either Outer Region or a Move Hacker will be claiming the throne of the old ones this week, which will be a first time for either of them. So that's great to hear. Always nice to see a fresh new face on the old one's favorite of the month poster. In any event, it's definitely going to be a interesting situation here of a Move Hacker running as fast as he possibly can across the battlefield to get involved here. But it's definitely going to be difficult, especially because he's going to be eating a ton of artillery fire the entire journey. Ooh, my nose is running. Alright, the cannons have begun opening fire. And it looks like they're sinking their initial shots into the Longbeards, which makes sense. He'll definitely want to switch over to the Thunderers as quickly as possible, because the Thunderers are the main value of this army, at least against enemy Dwarves. Ulthar's Raiders are hidden, at least for a good while. Skulder Guard would also be a pretty good target, as they do a ton of damage to elite infantry. Ninja Hunt, we're not going to do that, because that would defeat the point of this tournament. You know, this tourney series was made explicitly to emulate what it's like to play tabletop, and sometimes mirror matches happen. Sometimes a lot of mirror matches happen. It's just the way it goes. And that just means it's something you got to keep in mind when you sign up for the next tournament. Alright, we've got more cannons opening fire. Looks like the miners have actually managed to swing around the flank fairly undetected, which is pretty solid. The Rune Lord does get out ahead a little bit and eats a little bit of missile fire for his trouble, but he does have pretty high armor, so he's able to shrug off a good amount of that damage. Looks like the cannons are focusing their efforts in on the Thunderers and the Skulder Guard. Skulder Guard have already lost 4 models. They have 21 models. That's such an awkward number. All of the Thunderers, though, are beginning to open fire, and this fight is pretty much going to degenerate very quickly into a missile units versus missile units, with melee units just kind of smacking each other with squeaky hammers in the center. Because there's not really any armor-piercing melee units here. It's all in the ranged units where all the firepower is coming from. For a move hacker, he's definitely going to be relying very heavily on these miners coming around the flank and for them to get like a ton of value in. But I don't know if that's really going to happen. Here, though, we do see the ranged units are all in range of each other and are beginning to exchange fire. The outer region does need to make sure to tell all of his ranged troops to focus down enemy ranged troops as quickly as possible. Like, he probably needs to get a really fat volley over here into Ulthar's Raiders, because they don't have high armor and they don't have shields. So this would be a really easy unit to just obliterate off the battlefield instantly if you could. We do see a really nicely placed Rune of Wrath and Ruin go down on these Thunderers. I imagine the Master Rune... Oh, okay, the Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin went down on some Longbeards, which also isn't a bad pick. And it looks like this first unit of Longbeards is pretty much off the table, though there are a lot of miners coming around off the back. This basic Rune Lord does run into battle here to try and hold up these Dwarf Warriors, but they just sort of ignore him and go straight into Ulthar's Raiders, which they will be able to absolutely tear these guys limb from limb if they don't get the heck out of there soon. We do see the Dragonback Slayers run and to maybe get into these Thunders, but the Skulder Guard open fire and are just obliterating these guys. Skulder Guard are doing a ton of damage and are just dropping bodies. The Dragonback Slayers actually do manage to push through, and it looks like they're going to get right to these Rangers, and they are going to make mincemeat out of them. There are some Thunderers here all turning to provide crossfire, but while they're providing crossfire, that means they're not going to have their shields facing this direction, which means these Thunderers, Axe Throwers, and Iron Drakes are going to be able to shoot into their flanks and just start doing tons of damage. The cannons right now are still in good condition, though the cannons probably need to focus the Skulder Guard and get rid of them as quickly as possible. There's only 13 unit models left. That unit needs to go down because it just gets so much value. And the cannons would get good value for every model that they kill. In any event, the trading fire is continuing to go actually seemingly well in a move hacker's favor. He has managed to take a Thunder unit offline from outer region, and his Slayers have also managed to get rid of a unit of Rangers and are now getting rid of this Bolt Thrower, though they do have a Rune of Wrath and Ruin ticking them for a little bit of damage. Meanwhile, a move hacker's front line seems to be winning most of the front line engagements. He looks like he's losing this particular bout, but he's definitely winning on the left flank, and he's also winning on the right flank. And on top of these flank battles, he's actually got a... oh no, his miners actually were getting into the back line, but it looks like they have, for the most part, been dealt with due to a fairly high motion made from outer region's own Dwarves in the countercharge. We do see here that the Skulder Guard are continuing to wreak some havoc, but they do have some Dragonback Slayers coming right for them. who aren't exactly the best guys to deal with them, but there are, you know, 57 of these guys and only 13 of these guys, so eventually we'll be able to wear them down, especially with their superior combat stats. Over here, though, we do see that the range contingent of Move Hacker does actually get totally obliterated thanks to the consistent cannon fire. Even though these Slayers did manage to get into the back line, they can't be everywhere at once, and slowly but surely, a Move Hacker's ranged squad has been taken offline, and the balance of power is now slightly in Outer Region's favor, though it could potentially turn at any moment very easily. A Move Hacker does need to be super careful, though, because his Rune Lord is literally in the middle of enemy territory, with these Dragonback Slayers being his only support. If these Dragonback Slayers die, it's going to be super easy for all of these ranged units to turn around and just obliterate this Rune Lord. And if he goes down, then a lot of these units that a Move Hacker is rallying and bringing back towards the front aren't going to be doing that anymore, and it's just going to be rough. Meanwhile, we can see Outer Region's Rune Lord is doing his job well, fighting in the midst of things. I'm trying to be better about giving you guys close-up shots while still being able to keep an eye out on the wider battle. We do see that the red outline dwarves, who are Outer Regions, are doing a really good job of just making sure to shore up every area. They managed to expend a lot of their ammunition, and there are some... a Move Hacker does have some Iron Drake torpedoes, which are still providing support, but it seems to be killing friendly dwarves as much as it's killing enemy dwarves, just because it's kind of such a... They aren't the most accurate weapons, and they're clearly designed against large enemy targets, because they tend to fire pretty inaccurately up like a big vertical column. The balance of power has shifted even further into Outer Region's favor, and what's really going to damn him is if this Rune Lord survives or dies in this battle back here. He is pretty isolated, but the Dragonback Slayers here have rallied and are jumping on this Runesmith to provide him with some cover, so it seems like he's safe for the moment, surprisingly. We do see, though, that there are some Thunderers coming up over this hill, and if they come up over this hill and point their guns into the back of the Dragonback Slayers, that's going to be a bad time for those Dragonback Slayers. Over here, we do see that Outer Region has won this far flank and is now starting to condense his forces inward. All he has to do is crest this hill, and he'll be able to come into the rear of what's left of a Move Hacker's army. And a Move Hacker doesn't really have any frontline troops left. Like, all he's got left are some Iron Drakes kind of scattered around the place. But it looks like the Dragonback Slayers have been hit with the Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin and are being shot in the back with Thunderers. Miners are pursuing them. Cannons are still opening fire into fleeing enemy troops, applying that artillery leadership debuff to them, among others. And I'm pretty sure this is game. Looks like Outer Region is going to claim a pretty dominant victory thanks to that substantial artillery fire. Because although... Although a Move Hacker was able to get like pretty good work done against all of the enemies leading up to this, he just can't stand up to that triple artillery line, you know, which is interesting to say because artillery lines tend not to do large artillery lines along with a lot of shooting units like Outer Region's army tend not to be super successful in a lot of tournament formats, but worked out for him this time. He was fighting a lot of armies that were very, very slow, you know, being mostly dwarf meta. I mean, he had 19 units, 3 of which were artillery, and then another 5 of which were regular shooting. I mean, that's so much firepower at such a long range. Holy crap, those Iron Drakes got a ton of kills. God damn. 103 and 74 for how slow firing they are. I mean, damn. It just shows how much damage they do. They just pop people when they hit them. So congratulations to Outer Region for being this week's champion. It was hard in many ways, and perhaps easy in others, but what a pretty interesting week in a lot of ways. I was not we've actually been having a slow but sure increase in the number of dwarves in every week, but they've been taking the same build every week. So, I mean, it's kind of like investing in a dangerous stock where sooner or later that bubble's going to pop. And somebody one week is going to decide that they're going to bring a counter to that. And if 4 of the 8 players are still going heavy dwarves with the same list, if somebody shows up with a really nice counter build, like a heavy vanguard force or a heavy cav, heavy chariot armor piercing build, those dwarves are going to have a bad time. But we'll have to see what's going to result in next week. In any event, thank you all for watching. That is the second time the Dwarves have managed to claim victory since I started this tournament series. And I believe we are on week 7, week 8. We missed last week, so I'd have to check. But, pretty crazy series. That's the first time we've had that many of a single race, to my memory. But, yeah, so the Dwarves have claimed their second victory since the tourney series started. The last time we played, the Vampire Coast claimed their second victory. So, we'll have to see if the Dwarves are going to be able to win twice in a row. Nobody's done that yet. But in any event, thank you all for watching. It's been a fun time. Really appreciate those of you who donated, and I hope all you guys have been enjoying the videos I've been putting out lately. If you are just dropping by for the live stream, maybe go check out the videos I've put out over the last 3 days with my DLC predictions on the upcoming Lizardman DLC, my free DLC predictions. I'll have the Skaven DLC predictions coming out on Monday and Tuesday, so I hope you guys are looking really well forward to that. I'll give you guys some outro music before we shut the stream off, and with that, I hope you all have a great night. If you're interested in just hanging around, there's a good chance I will be streaming on Twitch later this evening for probably some Return of Reckoning, which is the Warhammer MMO. So if you want to join in on that, then feel free to follow me over on Twitch. I'm Loremaster of Sotek over on Twitch, just like I am here. And yeah, in any event, have a great day, and I'll see you guys next Friday if you just turn in for the live streams. So, see y'all then.